I have been to Beijing many times before, but I never thought that one day I would ride a bicycle like this. But when it comes, it will come. There is no shortage of this in Beijing. That day I rode into Beijing from Dongche Yangmen, and then rode out of Beijing from Dushanmen, a total of 4 days. While passing through Beijing, I mainly passed through a very small circle of poetry friends. Miss Horsepower. That morning when I rode my bicycle from Dongche Yangmen into Beijing, my heart was filled with joy, and I hoped to meet a friend soon so that I could share it with me. So I rode my bike directly to the nearest house of my old friend Mama, who lives near the Dongchen District Workers Stadium. This casual and warm girl is Molly. She smiled, with the alertness of a fox in her slender eyes and small nose. In the National Modern Poetry Group exhibition in 1986, she was one of the poet friends who participated in the exhibition in the name of experiencing poetry together with Zulingbo and me. Seeing that I came here by bicycle this time, Molly was very happy. Her parents, whom I had known for a long time, could hardly believe it was true. My mother was busy making lunch for us, while my father looked at my car repeatedly outside, nodding while watching, and shaking his head with a smile after a while. The first time I visited Molly's house was on my way to Hainan a few years ago. I remember that her kind father criticized me at that time, "You young people really make us incomprehensible, and you love to run around the world." But since that time, among Molly's friends from other places, her parents have the best impression of me. Now that I'm running like this, the father not only didn't say that I was running around the world, but also brought out a bottle of good wine to add to the fun during lunch. When the old man blushed from drinking, he talked about many wishes that he had no chance to realize when he was young. After a nice hot shower, Molly and I chatted in her writing studio and boudoir. She gave me a collection of her recently published prose poems. She read to me her novella No Father, which had just been published on Zhongshan, and she took out the novel Lonely Years she was writing. Tell me the synopsis. That afternoon was both exciting and relaxing. In fact, Molly is lonely in Beijing. She always goes to work alone during the day, dealing with her doll students, and then leaves work alone and returns home to write. In Beijing, where there are so many poets, she only interacts with a few poet friends such as Wang Jiexin from Poetry Magazine, Ma Jiaoming from Culture Daily, and Zhang Huafeng from People's Pictorial. At present, she is rushing to Jiexin's home every night to teach English to his young son. That night she decided to absent work instead of teaching English, and accompanied me to East Chang'an Avenue to eat Snack Street. Eating Snack Street is a tacit habit between me and Molly, which began when I first met her in Beijing. We were both laymen that time. From the moment we entered the street, we each asked for a portion of whatever we thought was delicious. A street that is nearly 1 kilometer long, I have eaten less than half of it, and my stomach can no longer hold it. Going forward, I can only watch eagerly. When I looked back, I saw the Longan purple rice porridge with 2 attractive red cherries on it, and I became envious again, so they had to share a portion. Unexpectedly, this joint eating experience has been eaten, and when I come back in the future, I will walk through it first, remember the stalls, and when you look back, you can choose your favorite ones and eat your fill. Later, every time we came to Beijing, we would cooperate once in this way. A sentence that Molly once said is related to my trip. That was when I went to Beijing 2 years ago. It seems to be a sign. When chatting with her, I somehow said, maybe one day I want to travel alone, but I'm afraid that I will leave empty-handed. Sorry friends. Molly immediately retorted, travel itself already has everything, what else do you want? Don't use our friends as a cover. Thinking about it now, this time I made up my mind to make the trip. Molly's words played an important role. Back at Mama's house again, sitting in the warm halo from the desk lamp, I copied to her a poem I wrote for her, which was also her favorite. Miss Horsepower. Someone is walking towards horsepower. Someone is leaving the horsepower. I'm sitting at Molly's house, crying and missing Molly. Everyone is horsepower. Horsepower is not horsepower. Horsepower is just one. Empty glass held hot. Make everyone drunk. Break the cup at will. Hand that scratches horsepower. Horsepower does not hurt. Everyone hurts. I met horsepower on the road. Horsepower say no. Miss the horsepower and move on. Horsepower, horsepower. Where are you? Echoes of civilization. In the past few days, the weather in Beijing has been particularly sunny, not as windy as in previous springs. When I went out in the morning, I made an appointment with Molly, and then called Zhang Huofeng and Yang Jin from the Public Security News and other friends. I agreed to meet at noon, and then went shopping alone. In fact, there is nothing to go shopping. I just went to the social science bookstore on East Chang'an Avenue to buy 2 books, and then ran to the Dongtan overpass to stare blankly at the river of cars and people below. Before the appointed time, Molly appeared first. Because I changed into a beautiful silk trench coat, which fluttered in the wind, I saw her from a long distance in the crowd. After a while, other friends also came. Everyone came to a self-service Western restaurant near Tiananmen Square, as the Beijingers say, Liu Weiner. Everyone got some beer, steak, etc., and chatted casually while eating. The decoration style of the restaurant is very elegant. There is a hint of music floating in the soft light, matching the leisure mood of friends, the transparent liquid in the goblet, and the exotic flavor in the exquisite tableware, which makes me those who are trekking are inexplicably moved. It was less than a month since I left this sophisticated modern civilization and became a rough traveler, but the days of eating dry food, drinking cold water, and living in small roadside shops along the way made me seem to be different from the people in front of me. It's the same sentiment that I haven't known for many years. It made me understand the mystery of another city under siege in life. People have been trapped in the meticulous civilization for a long time, hoping to change the simple way of life in nature, and when they are trapped by the simplicity of nature for a long time, they return to the civilization in the middle of the day. You will feel comforted again. From this, it also reminds me of a miscellaneous feeling I once wrote 2 cards of life, in which there is a sentence saying, people should neither be housekeepers nor prodigal sons. You must learn to go out, but you cannot forget to go home. Ordinary people, after all, it is too difficult for us to reach the state of lonely, independent, and unchangeable like Lao Tzu. Friends have been sitting there all afternoon at my request. Memorial Heize. Together with Ma Jiaoming and Wang Jiexin, we went back and forth at the homes of Zhang Huofeng and Mo Fei, 2 poet friends, and drank all night. At dawn, a poet whose name I had long known knocked on the door of Huofeng's house. When Gao Ming and Huofeng saw him, they talked about commemorating Heize. It was the 10th day Heize had just been lying on the rails in Shenhaiguan. Huofeng and the others also told me last night that they and some other poetry friends in Beijing are planning a small event to commemorate Heize, and they are planning to raise funds from friends to publish a collection of posthumous works for Heize. I asked about the time of the commemorative event, and knowing that I couldn't wait, I took out a little travel expenses as a donation to Heize's publication of his collection. At this time, Huofeng handed over the money to the poet, but when the man heard that I was traveling alone by bicycle, he declined politely again and again, saying, the dead are already dead, and the living should lie well. He said, death and life are personal matters, but poetry is a matter for all of us. I am a person who firmly believes in life and power. You will publish the poems left by Heize, and I will follow the routes left by Heize. That friend just accepted it and wrote down the addresses of several friends on the way for me to help me. Everyone talked about the cause of Heize's death. My point of view is, don't judge it based on a momentary event. It should be regarded as a comprehensive manifestation of the metaphysical and metaphysical when an artistic life faces reality. Heize, a talented poet who is 10 years younger than me, I have never met, and he only left me with nostalgia. Tao Yuanming's poem said, the relatives or the remaining sorrows, others have already sung. What is the way to die, and the body is on the same mountain. May Heize always be in the hearts. Dear friends. In Wang Jiexin's home in Beimiao Zihutong, he met Huan Qiangliu, a female poet who came to bid farewell to Jiexin's wife Shen Rui. She was a warm, generous, and talkative woman. She said that she was going to leave Beijing and go back to Guangxi soon. She had just suffered a change in her marriage. While we were chatting, the poet Duo Duo also broke in and told Jiexin that he was going to attend the upcoming Holland International Poetry Festival. And I will leave Beijing tomorrow and continue on my way. During this farewell moment, everyone chatted until very late. Duo Duo gave me a copy of his printed poetry collection Mileage, so that I can read it when I am lonely on the road. I have long known that Duo Duo's poems are very well written, and I believe in the saying that poetry is like a person when I met him at this time. Later on the road, I read his Mileage all over, and I am more convinced that he is respectable and amiable both in poetry and in man. I had no chance of seeing Molly again when I set off. Jiexin and Shen Rui prepared food for my journey and gave me some traveling expenses. I asked them to say goodbye to Molly on my behalf, then waved and left Beijing, heading beyond the Great Wall. Today, our starting point for this issue is to start with the C919, the hottest domestic large aircraft in a few days. It turned out that this is a great thing, we finally have our own big plane. But in the same way, it was no surprise that a group of things jumped out, and there were all kinds of yin and yang. Today, our what to say is not purely domestic, but assembled. If it is really as easy as these little blacks say, how come there are only 3 countries in the world that can produce such a large aircraft? Right. Not to mention anything else, as far as these countries in East Asia are concerned, those elite Japanese are not everyday, and they say that Japan is decades ahead of us. It has been advanced for decades. Why didn't you see what Japan assembled decades ago, and the Toyota big plane came out? Why haven't I seen a large aircraft produced by South Korea? Of course, as long as the Koreans take a look at it, the large aircraft will become Korean. Everyone can't help but imagine that if this happened to Japan, Japan would become the 3rd country in the world to produce large aircraft. Then you can look at that scene again. What kind of face will a group of spiritual Japanese on the internet look like? He knelt down and cried, slapping himself while crying. Is it so difficult to immediately admit that others are excellent? What is the representative of East Asian civilization and the symbol of the world's advanced? We have to reflect and learn again. So, the Jingri talk about being ahead for decades every day, but what is the reason for the lead? It may be leading the private film and television industry. According to their logic, Japan should really reflect on it. What caused Japan to not have its own large aircraft? Is there something wrong with the Japanese system? Or is their craftsmanship flawed? Or, did they really dare not steal their master's business? If this is the reason, then there is really no way. The tutoring is too strict. Just look at the end of May. Why did they choose to hold the meeting in Hiroshima, Japan? Don't the Japanese have any points in their hearts? To put it bluntly, that wasn't implied, it was clearly threatening him. But who would have thought that at a hangman banquet, everyone thought it was the United States who wanted to kick the Japanese to the forefront? As a result, the Japanese were so good that they first pulled South Korea under them as a backing, and even afterwards some people say that the United States and Japan are digging holes for South Korea through the Hiroshima meeting. In fact, let's be honest, Japan and South Korea have no winners at all, it's just a matter of morning and night. Originally, they chose Hiroshima for this meeting, and they didn't want to go to South Korea. Before they left, the Japanese wanted to draw South Korea. The Americans can't help it either. On the surface, what is the theme of their group's meeting this time to discuss further economic sanctions against Russia? Seriously, isn't this bullshit? Dobayo occupies a large proportion in many people's lives. Its founder, Jack Ma, became famous because of the popularity of the internet, but few people know that behind the scenes of Jack Ma and Alibaba he founded, there is such a woman. She is an investigator recognized by Jack Ma himself, who can monitor everyone in the Alibaba group, and once faced prison. She is Zhang Fang, one of the 18 arhats founded by Ali. To be honest, Zhang Fang never thought that she could achieve such an achievement. Looking back on the hardships of these years, she has a lot of emotion, and often talks about her past with her team members, because on the day in 1993, she a big turning point in life. Before the establishment of Alibaba, Ma Yun was a teacher in a middle school. Zhang Fang joined Mr. Ma in 1993. She admired Mr. Ma's enthusiasm and vigor, and Mr. Ma also had a good impression of her. But the relationship between them did not last long, and later Jack Ma started his own business. Zhang Fang's sense of smell is far beyond that of ordinary people. She thinks that Ma Yun's talent will become a great weapon in the future, so she asked to join his company when she just graduated. That was when Ma Yun was developing the China Yellow Pages. Zhang Fang joined this company. Because she is not a person who is good at this industry, she can only start from the bottom, step by step until today, and wait for this company to develop it. Afterwards, she came to Beijing with the people of this company. Her work was very difficult, but Zhang Fang was very happy because she believed that this company would definitely bring her success. Opportunity came suddenly. One day, Ma Yun called them together and asked them to contribute money to raise 500,000 yuan to form Alibaba. Show strong support for the company. At the beginning of Alibaba, there were only 18 people in total. Although Zhang Fang did not have any special educational background or special knowledge, she shouldered very important responsibilities. She was always an assistant, paying attention to the company's important the implementation and development of the decision-making. Although the assistant looks very ordinary, she has a very good overall planning ability, so Zhang Fang's current achievements are not accidental, but only in 2010, she began to emerge. At that time, Dobayo had just started, because there were too many customers, various problems emerged one after another, and various complaints came one after another. Ma Yun asked Zhang Fang to set up a special investigation team to target the intermediate suppliers, and the person in charge of the intermediate suppliers was the expert Wei Zhe hired by Jack Ma spent a lot of money. As a result, Wei Zhe did not produce the desired effect. Despite the poor quality of the intermediate supplier, he took an empty shell to collect money outside. For 2 weeks, Zhang Fang's strict inspections were carried out on the contacts of intermediate suppliers, more than 100 employees were arrested and sent to prison, and Wei Zhe was fired because of this. A huge disturbance completely purified the internal environment of Ali, and at the same time pushed Zhang Fang to the forefront. In fact, Ma Yun couldn't bear the incident. On the one hand, he was a client, and on the other hand, he was a comrade in arms for many years. But Zhang Fang's words made him make up his mind. She said that the company's culture is very important. If there is no severe punishment, Ali's business will not be rectified, and everyone will have to pay for their mistakes. Zhang Fang used this upright attitude to shape Ali's company culture. Later, when Zhu Huazhuan went online, corruption happened again. Zhang Fang was merciless and severely punished the company's senior management headed by Yan Liman. 7 senior management officers were imprisoned. After entering prison, Zhang Fang's position became more consolidated. Ma Yun also admitted that Zhang Fang had greatly helped his career, and asked Zhang Fang to conduct a comprehensive supervision of Alibaba, including the review of Ma Yun himself. Including the review of Zhang Fang. This is the high hope that Zhang Fang deserves. She and Alibaba started from the lowest level, experienced ups and downs together, grew up together, and purified the company's ethos together, and the company also gave her generous remuneration, all of which are worthwhile. Yes, behind the scenes of Ali, Zhang Fang deserves her name. Disclaimer. All manuscripts marked with the original statement are original articles of this site. If you want to reprint the original articles of this site, please indicate the source Jiang Brothers. Live a lifetime of 2 things. It crosses Hanshan Mountains from north to south, and it is only 60 kilometers to Shehi Town in the south of the mountain. I didn't care about such a little road. Even though the mountain road was difficult, I could reach it even if I pushed the cart for a day. As a result, I really just pushed the cart for a day. The roads in the mountains are so quiet, sometimes they are accompanied by high peaks, sometimes accompanied by streams, or a beach of chaotic rocks like buckets, or a few mounds of loess like clouds. The days in the mountains are so lonely. Occasionally, I hear a cry of BAA, or a shepherd yelling, but I can't find the source of the sound when I look around. It is difficult to distinguish people, sheep, and stones. Occasionally, a man from the mountains would drive a donkey with a bag on its back, pushing and beating up to the top of the lowest beam on the side of the road, and sending dung into the palm-sized fields. The sound of Beata came from a valley, like a monk knocking on a wooden fish. Looking down the valley carefully, he found an old stonemason who looked like a stone, squatting there and chiseling a stone. I don't know how many years he has been chiseling there. The hewn square stones piled up in front of him are as old as his age. Suddenly, a series of laughter broke the silence in the mountains. It turned out that 4 or 5 young girls and daughters-in-law were coming out of a ravine. They didn't know whether they were going back to their natal family, visiting relatives, or meeting their lovers. Women are water and soil. Where there are women, there is life. These men and women in the mountains, maybe they have never been outside the mountains. But it is precisely because they have never been outside the mountains that they live with a pure heart, a comfortable life, and a joyful life. It was past noon, and finally I saw a village on the side of the road. But I was surprised to see that in such a poor place, many new houses were built in the village. Moreover, it is also the first time I have seen such a way of building a house. All the white wood pillars around the house are half exposed, and on the upper part of the front and rear walls, there is a row of 3 stacked round pine corbels. Although the walls are built with rocks and loess, how much money will be spent on the wood and the blue tiles on the roof alone? Does this place have a special economic source? The author revisited his travels in 2004. Taking the opportunity of drinking water, I walked into a family who had built a new house on the side of the road. There is a couple in their 20s and 2 children in this family. The burly man with shaved green skin and bald head, narrow eyes, and thick lips, looked like a typical mountain man. His wife was pretty and handsome, and she loved talking and laughing. Speaking of the economic situation, the man told me that they are all small fields on the lowest beams, and they can only grow millet, lettuce, potatoes, yams, and the like. The average grain yield per mu is only 1 or 200 caddies. In good years, their family can earn 1,300 to 400 yuan, and in bad years, they can only earn 700 to 800 yuan. I asked him how much the new house would cost, and the answer was 10,000 with zero. The number startled me. I asked him how he could have so much money to build a house with such a small annual income, excluding food and expenses. He said emphatically, if you don't have one, you have to build it. If you live frugally, you have to borrow money to build a house. Pointing to his wife and children with a smile, he continued, from ancient times to the present, this place is the only thing that people live in for a lifetime. Raise a doll and build a house. If you don't build it, you can do it. I looked at the house carefully. Except that the house was new, there were almost no belongings in the house. Adults and children wore clothes with patches. I suddenly remembered that some friends in the back gave me toffee and chocolate in order to increase the calories on the way, so I took them out and gave them to the 2 children. They don't know each other and dare not eat it? The woman told them that toffee was sugar, but she didn't know chocolate either. All I can say is that it's all sugar, and that's good sugar. I asked if the older children went to school, and the woman said no, there was no school. The author revisited his travels in 2004. When I came out of this family, I kept thinking about how simple their purpose of life is, to live a lifetime of 2 things, raise a baby and build a house. But raising a baby and not studying, they can only stay in the mountains and rocks continue the 2 things. I remembered that I heard a joke before, the title was The Circle of Sheep Herding Boys. It is said that there is a conversation between a foreigner and a sheep herding boy in northern Shaanxi. What are you doing? Herding sheep. What are you doing to herd sheep? Sell money. What are you selling for? Marry a daughter-in-law. What do you marry a wife for? Give birth. What are you doing after giving birth? Herding sheep. Today I finally saw it, it was not a joke, it was real. Do I have more purpose in life than they do? Needless to say, children's houses, work, career, reading, and writing are still not enough, and they have to leave trains and cars instead of sitting, but they just ride a bicycle around China. Life, no matter what, is living a lifetime.